son, where'd you find this?
That's how you know somebody doesn't respect you. They listen to reply, not to be understood. They cut you off. They minimize what actually matters to you. They laugh at your boundaries, and then they call you sensitive when you try to hold the line. They show up late, they cancel last minute, forget the things you've told them, because in their world, your time, your energy, even your voice aren't a priority. They're just an option. You see, there are two kinds of people. Those who adjust when they realize they've actually hurt you, and those who expect you to adjust so they don't have to change. You don't need to be disrespected loudly to be disrespected deeply. Sometimes you'll see it. It's just in their tone, in their patterns, in the silence after you're known. Respect isn't what they say when they're watching. It's how they act when they think you'll tolerate it.
His own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the force of the Cold War.
And so it was a way of making me feel that they were a part of it.
You see it only when if the government had to change the school in the grid, they have to shut it down. We got state troopers out there. They got planes flown. They got those strange machines.
What up, what up, what up, what up? Happy hump day. Peace and blessings to the good people. I hope all is well. Shout outs to the people. Shout outs to the poets, the writers, the content creators. Pardon me. That sneeze that just randomly come out of nowhere. You know what I'm talking about. I hope all is well to everybody. I'm glad to be here. You know what time it is. One of my favorite parts of the week. Get comfortable, grab you something to snack on, something to drink, take your notepad out. If you have any thoughts that you might want to share in the comment section, you are more than welcome. We love to hear the interactions between us and the people. You know who I'm about to bring up, and if you don't get familiar, I will be in the background, of course, listening in with the rest of you guys. But it's an honor and a privilege to have her up here. So give me a solid like, share, repost, and also make sure you give her a warm welcome to the show. City, you up? I will see you in a bit.
Hello, everyone. I hope the lighting isn't too weird. Our light bulb in the ceiling went out, and I don't have extras, so we have to wait for housing to come out and replace it. So I'm currently using lanterns, emergency lanterns to light my office. So I apologize if the lighting is a bit strange this time. So today I wanted to talk about the Amoc Collapse. I'm, at least based on my algorithm, it shows up in my newsfeed a lot. But it has been reaching mass media, mainstream media channels as well. So I'm guessing this topic is going to be more from people are going to be more familiar with this than they would have been years in the past. And because of how it's showing up in the news a lot lately, I thought it would be a good time to talk about this phenomenon and how it affects us and what exactly is going on. So first, I want to define what the Amoc is. So the Amoc is an ocean current system in the Atlantic Ocean. It runs up along the east coast of the United States. You have warm water that kind of goes up north, and then it mixes with the cold water in the Arctic and kind of makes its way back down the east coast. And this is intertwined with, as most ocean currents are, it's intertwined with the air systems as well. I believe the jet stream is the main impactor of the currents on this coastline, because it will drag the air, and by dragging the water, or by dragging the air, you're going to end up dragging the water with it. You're going to, through winds, when you blow on top of the ocean, it creates mixing. And if you have as the jet stream is, as some of the other air currents, if you have a consistent flow, it'll eventually create a, what's the word I want to use? Like a belt type of system where you have the circulation rotating vertically. And that's what causes this current. The reason why it's ending up in the news right now is it is due to climate change in danger of collapse. And this is particularly problematic because it controls the climate. It acts kind of as a thermostat, maintaining the climate of that particular area. So most areas bordering the Atlantic Ocean, and consequently around the world, you would see dramatic changes in the distribution of rain, the temperatures that you would see, and the weather type breakdown that appears in each country, the climate. Part of this is because the ocean temperature has a strong influence on the type of weather that you're able to see, and the wind movement also has an impact on the type of weather that you see. The most classic example that I can think of is because of that air current. That's why you see hurricanes always go into the Gulf and then turn and go up the coast. It's really rare it's almost unheard of for the hurricane to just go straight across through over Mexico, New Mexico, Arizona. You'd not see that happen because of the way these currents are moving. And then they end up moving up the eastern coastline and rarely barrel their way through the Midwest. That's never been seen before. So these currents have a massive influence on how weather forms at sea level, basically. And so, as I said, climate change has been affecting this particular system. The reason why climate change has an effect on the Amoc is because of how climate change is changing the overall temperatures of both the ocean and the atmosphere. Currently, the main effect would be the oceans, while the air temperature is a compounding factor. The ocean itself carries way more of the heat than the atmosphere itself. Because the atoms are more diffuse in the sky. This isn't wine, by the way. It's in a wine glass, but Yeah, I was gonna come in with a full glass of this and be like, "Yep, it's that kind of day," but I forgot. All right. So as the ocean, as I was saying, the atmosphere is a lot more diffuse. The molecules aren't as close together as they are in the ocean. As you probably could guess with liquid, the atoms are much closer together, and so that's why they create the liquid in that form. And as a result, atoms that are closer together create and hold on to more heat because of how much they bounce against each other and are able to keep transferring the heat through the body. And as you heat up the ocean, it starts to affect the ability of the systems, the cycles to maintain themselves. I think I forgot to define Amoc completely. The Amoc is the Atlantic meridional, which means it's latitude. It goes, longitude, which means it's traveling along longitudinal lines. Overturning, which means it's that cycle, like I'd been explaining, and circulation, which means it's a current. That's important to know for this because when you have changes in heating a body of water, think of it like a teapot. When you put a teapot on the stove, eventually the water on the bottom is going to get hot enough that it's going to rise and you're going to see it bubbling, rotating, moving around. So heat is able to move the molecules of liquid faster, which makes it heat up. Hence the production of steam when it gets hot enough. And so, unfortunately, the areas of the Earth that are heating up the fastest, partially because of its location to the sun, but also because generally coldest places will get hotter faster because they have, I don't remember the exact science behind it, but they're farther from room temperature, so it's easier for them to warm up than things that are already kind of warm. So as you have this, so the top of the planet is warming the fastest. The regions that they've specified that really get the most warming out of the entire world is the Arctic, upper Canada, down towards Alaska, and then along the East Coast. Those seem to be exhibiting the fastest warming, which makes sense as well because it also is it is the more susceptible of the two poles. Antarctica has a lot more snow, a lot more like compacted snow, where the Arctic, a lot of it had been floating on the ocean. And when your ocean is warming up, that allows the ice to melt faster, and so the land can thaw out much quicker as well. So there's a tremendous amount of warming going on in the Arctic region, and as that happens, you're no longer going to have that flow of cold water that helps to sustain this cycle. And if with cold water, especially nutrient-rich cold water, and that they kind of help each other, where cold water is able to sustain more life, planktonic life, and then it also is able to hold on to salt better, and so all of that makes the water much heavier. And heavy, once you have the warm water coming in upwards, you're going to have the cold water dropping, and it like the cold water kind of comes on top and pushes down, and so you have more cold water dropping, and as it drops, it eventually hits the ground and will start to travel, and that's kind of what creates that circulation. But when you start to introduce two things, one, as I said, the heat from the ocean, but also fresh water. As this ice is melting, it's adding fresh water to the system, which has a similar effect as heated water. When the fresh water hits salt water, it makes the salt water in that area less salty and therefore less dense. So you're removing the density of the water that is up in that region, which is going to make the entire system more fragile. Because if you, like, let's say you have a conveyor belt, and for sake of this particular demonstration, it's kind of going under and coming back up. If you fray that belt, it's going to start having issues with the whole thing. And if it breaks, then it completely falls apart. There is no rotation anymore because you've basically severed the connection. And this is not scientific. I mean, this is not science fiction. This has happened before. There have been times in Earth's history that we have seen the Amoc collapse due to various changes in both the land and the sea. They've happened for different reasons, but the Amoc has collapsed a couple times at least, I believe, over history. You're able to prove this by finding out the climate of the regions during those particular times, but I won't get into that. But we have known that this has collapsed before from changes in Earth's temperature. Additionally, it's especially relevant now because we are currently losing particular circulations in other areas. Off the coast of Panama, they, in 2025, had the first time in decades that, specifically 40 years, that the upwelling system off that coast stopped. It just disappeared. The deep waters did not come up and mix with the warmer upper layer, which is problematic because that cold water helps to moderate the temperature of the body of water. That's why if you're in a shallow lake in the desert, it's going to be significantly warmer than if you had a beach kind of in a hot region, because the ocean is able to distribute that heat away because it has that circulation, but a lake of most smaller sizes do not have that opportunity to circulate the water. So you just end up with a water column that is significantly warmer than it could be. It's kind of interesting too, the wave action and whatnot have an influence as well, because the lake is a still body. That's why you'll have that. But if the lake is deep enough, you're going to have a layer of cold water, and you can actually feel the difference. If you've ever been scuba diving or snorkeling or just swimming into certain types of lakes, there are times where you can feel the thermocline, the difference, and it's abrupt. You'll swim and it'll be 60, 70 degrees, and then you swim down and you can feel you just like enter this 50-degree water. I've experienced it scuba diving. I went down 30 feet, and towards the bottom, like 5 to 7 feet, it literally felt like I was entering water from the water. It was really interesting feeling. But yeah, so this mixing of the ocean is starting to falter. We're starting to see areas of the earth that are having vulnerability with their currents, where the currents are showing signs that they're struggling, where the currents aren't as robust. They might be wandering, moving to different areas, or slowing down. They're not as rapid of a transition. There isn't as much of a rapid transition. And this is particularly problematic because, as I said, the Amoc and other circulations around the globe help to moderate the weather that you end up seeing on land. Because, as I said, it distributes the rainfall, and if you have a cycle that transports precipitation to other regions, but that turns off, then you no longer have that circuit to bring water to those regions. And so they'll end up becoming more drought prone because less storms are going to wander in their direction. It also, as I said, affects heat transfer. It produces winds. In this case, it will kind of drag the hotter air kind of off the coast and dissipate it into the ocean. Whereas if you're in a place like Arizona or New Mexico, there isn't as robust of winds, trade winds, or other types of upper atmosphere winds to drag the heat away. So it kind of just bakes there. That's why, not all in all cases, but a lot of places that have frequent storms and winds, it is a feedback loop where you end up cooling the ground faster. But as soon as you lose those storms, not only do you lose the cloud coverage that cools the land, you lose the precipitation, but you also lose those winds that help to transfer weather across the ground. There's a whole bunch of different factors that affect climate. So geography does play a role. However, they do have a general knowledge based on both historical records and also through modeling what types of impacts that we can expect. Originally, there wasn't as much of a fear. Back when I was in high school and even into college, we discussed in our environmental classes the Amoc and its importance. It kind of was in the news in, was it 2024, when Day After Tomorrow came out. Day After Tomorrow, if you have seen it or haven't, is a movie, disaster movie, on what would happen if the Amoc collapsed. It's obviously been very exaggerated with the movie. The progression was within days. As the Amoc collapsed, you literally had a bunch of cities along the East Coast just flash freeze. It just like moved in over the land and caused exceptional cold, to the point that like you would die, just freeze to death being outside. And then it also caused, I think, like wild tornadoes, if I remember correctly, and they had a tornado, I think, in Los Angeles, like a big one. And there's some, I think it created like large hail. There's a whole bunch of impacts that they greatly magnified. Not only would it not be that bad, and then of course their distribution of disasters was not entirely accurate, but it does not take that. It's not that quick. So if the Amoc collapsed in our lifetime, we would still not see extremely severe impacts for a couple hundred years. But the current concern is that the collapse of this current will affect our weather within our lifetime. Obviously, it's not going to flash freeze a chunk of the country, but it will change things in a way that will directly affect us and our ability to thrive as a species. They originally said the general consensus before this recent study indicated that before 2100, it was very unlikely that we'd see a collapse. However, they've recently shown, they've done a new analysis that was for a longer period of time. And they found through that research, the collapse, the tipping point, which is when it basically makes the outcome inevitable, will probably be passed within the next few decades, 20 to 30 years. So that means the tipping point refers to, like, it's a good example. Like when you pour water from a cup, you're going to tip, and there's eventually going to be a point where that water is forced to go over the edge and you're going to pour that cup out. That is basically what that references. With a climate change tipping point, you have pushed the system past what it can handle. You've changed the variables enough that that process can no longer occur. And that's basically what this new research found, is that we are going to see us hit the tipping point where it is no longer possible to stop the Amoc shutdown. So it's less that they aren't saying in the news with this that we're going to start seeing the direct impacts in a few decades. What they're saying is that we're going to get to a point, or I should say, we're not going to have severe impacts anytime soon, but the collapse of this system will be unavoidable within a few decades. And while that doesn't sound as bad, like, oh, we have more time to fix stuff, we are on the trajectory of a high emissions scenario. We are still putting out way more greenhouse gases than this planet can hold. And just like with heat, the oceans absorb the majority of the carbon dioxide that exists. Additionally, climate warming has been slowed in recent decades because of the not aerosols, what are they called, from airplanes, whatever I'm blanking on the name of it, but whatever they just banned from from airplanes, those had reflective capabilities where it would reflect the Earth's heat, or the sun's heat and light back out to space. But now that we don't have that, the Earth is going to warm up significantly faster in the next couple decades. There's a whole bunch of different factors that are affecting this, but we have been kind of lucky up to this point where there have been some mitigating factors. The ocean was absorbing more of the carbon dioxide. We had those clouds. Prior to probably like the 2000s, maybe more like 1980s, we had way more open land. But today, like heat island effect and everything the cities are doing, AI, you name it, there's a whole bunch of things that are going to contribute not only more greenhouse gases into our environment, but also are going to prevent the reduction of greenhouse gases. So we're definitely going to be seeing a spike in the next while. So it's already close to a tipping point, and the fear is that with this increase in carbon emissions rather than decrease, which is necessary to prevent the shutdown, that it is very, very likely going to be occurring within most of our lifetimes. They originally said it was like a 50-50, but now they think it's closer to like 75%. So yeah, if this happens, as I said, it's going to affect the climate. The biggest changes would be to the rain belt that goes over Europe, but it would affect basically the whole world. But how do I go through this? There's quite a number of effects. One area, and I also want to mention, all of these changes are not going to be across the board. Like without this, you're not going to have, this whole area is going to be wetter, this whole area is going to be drier. It is still very dependent on what the environment is like, what people do to help the land. So there are other ways we can mitigate the effects, but generally what we're going to probably see is that Europe is going to get much colder. They're going to have more cold snaps, probably more snow. Certain parts of Europe, likely Portugal, Spain, potentially Italy, and some of the Mediterranean, they'll see a change in precipitation and would likely tip into drought rather than tropical desert. I think that's what they're classified as right now, because the entire tropical rain belt will shift southward. This will also directly impact the top part of Africa, northern Africa, with the loss of this tropical rain belt. Significant portions of the African Sahel region would dry out. We'd very likely lose parts of the rainforest that are up in those areas. You also would see increased flooding in the areas where the rain belt is moving to. And part of the reason why this is problematic, people might think, oh, well, they're already drought ridden. When a land area is accustomed to a certain type of climate, the plants, the ground, the makeup of the soil, everything is in what's the word? It's basically adapted to that particular climate. So the soil and the plants, let's say you're in a desert region, easiest example, the plants are going to be exceptionally good at holding on to water and preventing water from disappearing. That's why you have waxy cactuses and plants with really tiny leaves. That way they reduce how much water they lose to the environment. They're going to be like lighter in color. But if you go to rainforests, you're going to have big leaves and like really thick, tall plants, because one, they can afford to, and two, they're trying to, like in the rainforest, it's quite thick, so you want to get as much sunlight as you possibly can since you're competing with so many different plants. And of course, there's also different adaptations, but generally you'll see much leafier plants in regions like that. So when you have shifts in these environments, not only are the plants and animals not going to cope with those changes very well, they're going to have loss of certain food sources. They're going to have changes in the water that they have access to. You might see degradation of their habitats. A lot of animals are highly dependent on the temperature of those regions, particularly reptiles, insects, even some mammals. If they're going to have to travel and move to different locations, which again can remove predators, can remove prey items, and disrupt the whole system. So it's very problematic for the life that uses that region. Not to mention humans, like our own cities are built to withstand the climate that we're living in. And if you are used to getting a lot of, if you have buildings that are built to withstand high temperatures or something like that, and then it gets really cold, or there's gonna be a lot of issues. I'm not as great with architecture, but if you have these shifts, then the people in the living things in those regions are not going to be prepared to withstand the new conditions. What was the other one? And then the land itself is also very susceptible to changes. Again, going back to the desert, a lot of desert ground is very hard, and it doesn't absorb water very well. And so when you get exceptional amounts of rain in a desert, oftentimes it just flows off the land and it doesn't actually get absorbed. Water has to come down slowly and in moderation for it to adequately soak into hard ground. So when you have that's why you have like those desert blooms after it first rained, because the plants basically spent they save their energy, and they're only going to try and breed, because that's very energy intensive for a plant, and release their flowers when when they get like a substantial amount of rain. But again, in the desert, you also don't have as many plants as you would in the rainforest or other areas. So when it does rain, it's just going to get washed away, and it's not going to, besides like low-lying areas like lakes, you're not really going to have any accumulation or storage of that entire quantity of rain. So if you move a rain belt onto a desert area, you're going to have increased flooding. So people that are living in drought-prone regions that are suddenly going to be getting a lot of precipitation are going to also start seeing a massive increase in severe flooding after any storms. It also is complicated by climate change itself, because climate change allows the atmosphere to hold in more water than it ordinarily could. As I kind of said earlier, heated air is able to hold on to more heat because of the molecules bouncing around, and with that, it can also hold more water, and it allows the raindrops to get bigger, and you also to have more of them. So if you have bigger raindrops and more heavy clouds, you're going to have more intense downpours, because basically once the raindrops get too big, gravity pulls them down. And if you have all of these really large raindrops able to form really quickly, you're going to have deluges rather than just like rainstorms that travel across the ground. And then on the flip side, as you could probably guess, when you have regions that are used to a tremendous amount of rain, or at least regular flows of rain, patterns of rain, and then you take that away. We all know what happens when you don't water a plant. The animals that rely on those regions lose their habitat, lose the plants, and it also kills ground coverage, and so it intensifies the heating of those regions. That's why a lot of cities are starting to put in trees to help cool the whole area. So yeah, that change in precipitation, that change in temperature is going to affect many, many regions of the earth, and is going to affect where wildlife is able to live, the food they have access to, the water that they have access to. It'll change where bodies of water are located. It'll change the water table, and it'll also contribute to changes in the ocean's other currents, because with more rain, you're also going to be introducing more fresh water into the ocean. And as I said, the shifts in temperature are also going to affect these patterns and cause two further changes. So that's why this tipping point is so important, because this particular current is quite impactful on how the earth operates. And so we don't want to disturb this, because not only is this going to affect the planet, as we probably all could guess, but it'll affect us directly. As I kind of mentioned, it'll start creating disasters in areas that are not used to those types of disasters, and will also increase the intensity and frequency of different disasters. The biggest is heat waves, cold snaps, where you have an intense level of heat for extended periods of time, and also cold snaps, because if you lose that current, the air around is going to move more slowly, or move more erratically, and so it's going to enable high pressure systems, which are the ones that cause droughts, and then low pressure systems, which help create severe weather based on the temperature of the region. You get like tornadoes if it's a warmer region. Colder regions, you'd get like blizzards and stuff like that. So besides changing those disasters, like where they happen, as I said, it'll increase the frequency in certain regions. And if you're experiencing disaster after disaster in the same region, it's going to create mass migration. If people are, obviously, it's going to cause deaths, loss of homes, homelessness. You'll also I think, to me, this is probably the scariest part. It's going to change our entire agricultural system. We as humans are used to planting certain crops in certain areas, just like wild plants. Our crops rely on a specific set of temperatures, a specific set of conditions to live where they live. And if you change that, you're going to have the farmers that are experts in planting certain types of crops no longer being able to plant the crops that they were originally planting. Like, imagine being an expert at something, and then suddenly your boss comes to tell you, so you're not going to be doing this job anymore. You have to do this new thing that you have no experience in. Like, that's kind of what's happening. And so a lot of farmers are going to have to quit. They're going to have to migrate. They're going to have to change the crops that they grow. And some places will become an area where you can't grow anything, particularly desert regions. And another risk is that a lot of the cash crops, the wheat, the rice, the sorghum, I think, a lot of these are high water loving plants, and a substantial amount of the population relies on these crops for food. And it also fulfills a large calorie count of all the food that we eat worldwide. If you lose the ability to plant these crops, you're going to very likely see famines. And this could even extend to regions that normally don't see famines. We mentally often associate famines with Africa and Asia and some of the less built up regions, but we might actually start to see it in even North America, Europe, Australia, as fewer food is available to people. In North America right now, I'm doing an episode on this in the future. We are going through an exceptional drought. This is the worst drought they've seen in decades, and I think even into the historical record, like the prehistoric record, this is one of the worst droughts they've seen. Even Florida is in drought, which is crazy to think about because they literally get rain every day, it seems. But the quantities that they're getting are not the same, and so they're actually in a drought. And as a result of this, farming in North America is becoming increasingly difficult, and I've been seeing a lot about farmers quitting because it's no longer affordable. They don't have water. They aren't able to plant the same crops again because they're just dying in the fields. So they're worried in the U.S. that there's going to be a collapse of our agricultural system. So we're already kind of seeing these effects take place just from the climate change that we've introduced into the system. But if we have the Amoc collapse, that's just going to make this 10 times worse, or more, because these systems are essential for maintaining the type of climate in the U.S. that, as well as other countries, that make food production possible. So the food systems, to me, are one of the most alarming parts, because right now the only reason we're able to sustain the populations that we have on this planet are because of our agricultural systems and our ability to produce any of the food that we need, and to the point that we have excess. Like, food waste is one of the worst worst pollution problems out there. I think like 40% is thrown away or something crazy like that. Let's see. Americans waste 30 to 40% of their food supply, with households contributing 43%, and it's the top material at U.S. landfills at 24%. So, yeah, we waste a lot of food already, and now we're not going to have access to that food. So, oh wow, that's 1.3% of U.S. gross domestic product, I think. Yeah. So yeah, food issues to me are one of the most concerning aspects, because that is something that affects people unanimously. No matter how rich or poor you are, food shortages are going to affect you, because if it is not in the grocery store and you don't know how to grow your own food, you're just not going to have it. And I promise you, there's so many crops that we take for granted that most people have no clue how to create, how to grow. I want to see somebody successfully have a rice paddy in their backyard. So yeah, it would be a tremendous problem to affect our whole food system at a time that food is more expensive than ever, and is going to continue getting more expensive because of other things happening in this country. But if you add the Amoc collapse, then you're affecting the precipitation of regions that are quite productive: the Mediterranean, Europe, the East Coast, the Midwest, California. California is actually the sixth largest food economy in the entire world. We rank up there with countries with how much we're able to produce. And with Amoc collapse, I believe we're going to become drier in the south, and wetter in the north. Let me just check on that. Yes, I cannot forget about that too. California. Looks like, yeah, so basically the desert area will get less snowpack in the mountains. We'll get less rain in the desert. We'll get a loss of tree growth. So it seems like we'll tip more towards desert, with exception to the far north, where we'll get more rain. Northwest will probably get more rain as well, but also have hotter summers. Another main effect that is also extremely concerning is the fisheries. We are already seeing species migrate. There are fish, birds, mammals, a lot of these animals, insects, that are moving to regions that they've never lived in. We're having them move to colder regions, escaping the traditional areas that they live in. And with that, you can have a collapse of the fisheries. Either the animals die off. For example, the ocean right now is getting too hot for marine mammals, and there's a theory that the widespread beachings are because the ocean is getting so hot and causing them like issues. But also the migration will, similar to agriculture, if these farmers that are used to getting the same, they're used to fishing the same products in the same areas, most animals require different methods of acquisition, and that moves to a different region beyond where you live. You might either quit being a fisherman and find a different job, or you might have to migrate your family. And regions that are used to having certain types of crustaceans and mollusks, seafood, and then they lose that. They're like, the restaurants will be affected, the vendors will be affected, the fishermen will be affected, and the people who eat it will be affected by higher prices. And if you're in a region that is not as industrially developed as places like Europe and the United States, or like parts of China, Japan, you're also going to struggle even more because you're competing with these high producing countries with more, I hate to use the word primitive, but it's, I guess, the best word for this. Primitive methods, smaller scale. Let me go with that. If you're more of like a smaller scale fisherman, you're not going to be able to keep up. It's not going to be as profitable because you don't have access to the types of foods that you normally sell. You're not finding the same species. You're not able to find enough to support your families. And again, when producers and farmers lose the crops, the animals, the environment that enabled them to produce what they did, they're either going to leave the field or they're going to migrate. And I think people underestimate the danger of mass migration. A lot of people think of it more like, oh, these people are just are transplanting and they're just going to make cities busier and blah, blah, blah. But mass migration is a huge factor in political unrest and social unrest, as you have floods of people trying to move to these new cities where they're already struggling to find land, to places to live. Prices are high. People are struggling to get things to eat. And now you're going to be competing for resources with an additional thousands of people, potentially hundreds of thousands, depending on how severe that issue is. You're going to start having a lot more racism, a lot more like not in my backyard type of behavior where you're just going to close off your city to people. You're going to have a lot more like borders closing, people fighting over land, people making land grabs, or I should say countries making land grabs. It's a potential, what's the word? It could potentially cause a war, is what I'm trying to say. The temperature changes can also cause stress that can cause more anger. And so there's going to be an increase in violence. There's going to be an increase in dysfunction, really, in the system. Additionally, infrastructure will be strained based on climatic changes and weather changes, places that are not used to heavy amounts of rain might have houses washing away, might have like power poles burning because they weren't counting on having wildfires. Wildfires are going to be another big issue, as forests that are used to heavy amounts of rain that are not getting it anymore dry out and they burn. So the climate system, the Amoc system, it's an understatement to say how important this oscillation is. We need it to maintain the way of life that we have across the world. This is going to affect where people are able to make their livelihoods. It's going to increase people's susceptibility to disasters, expose people to more frequent disasters, expose people to changing conditions, changing ecosystems. We're going to see species extinction of both plants and animals. And we are going to see changes in how we're able to operate our cities in various regions. And some areas might become uninhabitable if it becomes way too hot. Particularly the equatorial regions would be the highest concern for that. Other areas might get in combination with sea level rise that will also happen. The currents affect the sea levels in the areas where it's kind of operating. So you'd actually see an increase in sea level rise just from the Amoc collapse all along the East Coast and other areas in the Atlantic. So it's going to be incredibly impactful over time if this does tip. And just from my own experience, my own understanding, my own guess based on all of the research that I've read, I think it's pretty likely that it's going to happen because unfortunately, I don't see people making changes in time. What I've learned from my own research, my capstone when I graduated with my master's degree was on climate change perception and how I surveyed populations from multiple zoos in the country to see how people felt about climate change, whether they think it would affect them, whether they'd change for it. And one of the things that I found is most people are not going to respond to something unless it starts to personally affect them and their family. And so I think people aren't going to start paying attention until globally people, even in like the safe suburbs, are being impacted by these things. I think we're getting to that point, but I don't think that's going to come for at least a couple of years where people clue in and start demanding action on climate change. So I do think that scientists are definitely on point with this, and we will likely see this tipping point crossed. But I do want to reassure you that it's not going to be like the movie. It's not going to collapse and then you wake up and your whole city's frozen. It is going to be it will be exponential, but it will still be a gradual change. So it's not, well, I don't want to understate how important it is to avoid this. It's not going to kill us all off. Like, we're not all just going to die. I know that's how scientists can make it sound sometimes, or at least the news media that's interpreting scientific articles make it sound. But it could potentially, I will say, it could potentially have a small benefit where with the shifts in climate, it could allow for ice age-like cooling and increase sea ice expansion and glacier formation. This is from a modeling study, but it is one study out of many, and most of the other studies aren't indicating that we're going to see a ice age appear suddenly. But it is still something to be concerned about because it is going to change how the entire Earth kind of operates as a whole. And these are not changes that we are prepared for at the moment. So going into the future, I think obviously scientists need to keep investigating this, understanding it, trying to figure out the best ways to manage the potential impacts. That way cities can adequately prepare for the potential changes that can exist, because obviously humans can kind of adapt quickly within their lifetime, but cities usually take more like decades to adjust to changes in climate and stuff like that. We'd also need to help our ecosystems bolster themselves from these impacts, unless we want to see a mass die off of important species. So, so yeah, with this particular one, there's not too much we can do as individuals besides A, talking about it, and B, continuing our own journeys to make ourselves more climate change resilient and reduce our own impact on the planet. The biggest thing though that we can do is vote for people that actually support the earth, that actually want to improve the system and are not contributing their money to people that are taking advantage of us. A lot of our across the world, a lot of people are bankrolled by ones that are more interested in money and in profit off of us, and are more interested in taking whatever they want regardless of the consequences, and we cannot allow these people to be the ones making decisions for us. So voting, if your country allows it, is wildly important, particularly in America right now, just saying. Paying attention to who's running your country, and if you see corporations or politicians doing things to your planet that are going to disrupt your life, you need to make it known, put it out there, talk about it with people, post it on social media. We just need to make this part of the everyday conversation. That way we can start focusing on solutions and working together to decrease the likelihood of a dramatic and dangerous systemic collapse. So I hope that you found this interesting. I know I threw a lot of information, a lot of science at you, but there are quite a number of scientists right now online discussing this exact topic. So if you want to learn more, there's a bunch of fantastic scientists out there that are having this discussion. My personal favorite is David Beckwith. Let me double check. That's definitely not him. Paul Beckwith. He did one quite recently. So I highly recommend him, Paul Beckwith. And I also really like James Hansen. He is known as one of the peak climate scientists out there. And then I also like a woman named, where are you? I can't find. Where are you? Okay, what's your name? She's on The World, the Universe, and Us. She does a fantastic breakdown of recent climate change articles and gives an honest scientific discussion, which is really important. We don't want to fall into fear mongering because we don't want to scare ourselves into thinking we don't have solutions when we do. But we want to be honest with ourselves. We don't want to delude ourselves into thinking that this isn't something we should care about. It'll affect us, and it won't affect me until the future. It's something that we need to know about and be concerned about, and navigate our society to manage before the worst effects actually hit us. So yeah, I hope you did find this interesting and I wasn't just rambling on and on. I love this type of stuff, so I get super into it, but I hope I was able to provide some useful information to you. if you want to, for fun, watch Day After Tomorrow. It is a fantastic movie, in my opinion, but again, keep in mind it's not accurate. That would be taking place over hundreds of years and not a week. But yeah, I enjoyed talking to you guys today. In one of the next coming weeks, I'm going to be talking about a couple additional climate change topics that relate to what we're talking about today. And I hope you'll join me for those. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great day. I will be back on Friday, hopefully for our poetry night. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great week and get to Friday quickly. Bye.
His own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
And so it was a way of making me feel that they were a part of it.
You see it on the screen. If the government had to change the school in the grid, they have to shut it down. We got state troopers out there. They got planes flown. They got those strange machines.